Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight's guest is Mr. Rich Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman has almost a half century of UFO experience. He's been involved with MUFON in all sorts of different ways. He's been involved in some 400 sightings, landings, other paranormal activity. And he's worked and met with some of the most famous names in ufology, which I'm really interested in hearing about. So we're going to be bringing him on in just a second. But before that, I wanted to make a quick announcement. As of today, I just received notification that Topic UFO program has been accepted as part of Roku's public library of channels. This is huge news because it is going to make the show easily available, easily found by all 5 million Roku devices out there. So this is huge as far as potential viewership. So can't be more excited about that. All right, very good. So let's get on with the show. Mr. Rich Hoffman, are you out there, sir?
I'm here, Rick.
How are you tonight, Rich?
I'm doing great, and by the way, congratulations on that move. I hope that works out for you.
Oh, it is. It's going to be a potential large thing. Rich, I was thinking today, when I interview people such as yourself that have been involved in ufology for so many years, have met so many people, done so many things, it's really hard for me to know how to start or ask the first question. So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind. I want to change things up a little bit tonight, and I want to start off by asking you a hypothetical question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Let's say someone came up to you and said, Rich, you have 2 or 3 minutes to address the total population of the planet Earth, and you can tell them anything you wanted to about ufology, about UFOs, about ETs. But you only have 2 or 3 minutes to tell what you wanted to tell. What would you say? What would you want the people of the world to know about this subject?
Well, that certainly is a tough challenge in 2 and 3 minutes, but let me try it this way. I guess that for me, it's a situation where I got involved in this at age 13. I've been with it for now 49 years. I wouldn't have spent 49 years of my life just like looking at swamp gas or anything like that if I didn't think that there was something to it. I've had the pleasure of working around and being on cases where I stood next to Project Blue Book staff who were actually doing their investigation the same time I was. I had the pleasure of talking with Air Force pilots who had just taken film footage of the UFO in the sky, and it was confiscated after they landed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That I've stood out in the middle of a landing area in the middle of a field that's been baked 2 feet into the ground, 70 foot in diameter, has puffed weed around the rim from something like that. And that I've seen, much of the FOIA information and everything else that's been released. And there's a clear and present concern that's been throughout history on this subject. And to me, it's a valid subject. It's been there. It's real. It's a global phenomenon. Doesn't matter whether you're in the water or whether you're in the air or whether you're in space. We've had observations of those sightings. And to simply deny it is just ludicrous. That's pretty much what I would say.
Well, I totally agree with you there. We still have a somewhat large percentage of the population. It's starting to get smaller, but there's still a fair amount of people that think this is a bunch of hogwash. And I can't understand while people could say that when we have so much evidence. As far as I'm concerned, it's evidence. Okay, we don't
Well,
have the smoking gun yet, but
no.
you know,
But I,
go
let
ahead.
me share, let me comment on that, because your point's well taken, and I know that you know what I'm going to say. We both work in the IT world, and so the situation I've been watching over my experience dealing with what they call knowledge management in the IT world
Mm-hmm.
is that we, during the time that I've been working with the DoD. I'm a consultant and a contractor. I've watched as people have come and gone in their retirement. So the generations are passing, right? And I watch what happens as the older generation departs after doing all the work, and their computer is loaded down with wonderful knowledge on their desktop. And then I watch as some IT person comes up and completely does a wipe disk on that. And now a new person walks into the seat who's younger, who hasn't got any of the awareness of anything that transpired for that person's 40 years of sitting in that government job. And in an instant, an IT person has completely wiped out everything on that person's hard drive that they puked their brains out and put that onto that hard drive, and it's not retrieved.
Yep.
So what I'm saying to you is that I'm watching, as I become an older fart, that you and I may have experienced the situation where we grew up with the heavy volume of UFO reports. We saw the military Project Blue Book in action. We saw that type of stuff. There's people today that never had that experience. Mm-hmm. And their knowledge base comes from either the internet or from reading. And if you take a look at just the ridiculous kinds of stories you see out on the internet, it's any wonder that they don't know that it's a very serious phenomenon, because it's all being looked at as being, it's kook stuff, it's little green men. And they don't have to go far to watch the news media, who will get on the evening, play that same kind of thing.
Right.
So what we're dealing with is a generation change that's happening, to where now you've got a large population of young people out there who haven't got that understanding like you and I have. Okay?
Yep.
And so, and so that's what we've got, is a generational knowledge passing that hasn't happened. And they're having to rediscover it, and they have to weed through all the ash and trash that's out there a lot more in abundance than what it was for you and I, maybe like when we got started. I was 13 years old, and I didn't have the internet to go to learn about this.
Right. And, I listen to people that are maybe 10, 15 years older than I am, and they provide so much information that I've never heard of, because I'm fairly new to this this subject.
Okay.
And I totally understand what you're saying, because one of the, I guess, complaints that I have about the study of ufology is that there is no process and procedure really with all the information. It's scattered all over the place. You have to kind of go weed through it, pick out what you think is right and what's not right, and then come up with your own evaluation and decision on what you think this thing's all about. So I don't know if we'll ever get to something like that, but it definitely could be used, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Rick, let me tell you, I mean, when I was age 13, you had a number of groups that were out there that were already investigating them, and you had things like NICAP, an organization called NICAP. You had an organization that was run by Donald Kehoe. There we had April and Jim Lorenzen, who had APRO, and there were a lot of good, solid organizations, because guess what? In the 50s and early 50s and stuff like that, tremendous numbers of sightings that were going on, and organizations did start, and they started to collect it. But what you could see right from the very beginning was that you had a situation where, why do you spring up with different organizations to handle the phenomena as opposed to one, right?
Right.
So now what we have is a splintering of that information. And what I've seen over the period of history that I've been involved with it, we don't have one database for sightings. We've got hundreds of databases to collect sightings. We don't have one organization We've got many organizations,
Mm-hmm.
and we don't speak as a one voice because of everybody's different opinion and their own belief about what these things are. They're, you know,
It's just like religion. I mean, you got churches and
you hit on it, and I was going to say that because to me, it's more like you've got different, I hate to say it, but different religions or different cults where you've got an individual that comes in and says, hey, look, this next weekend we can get in contact and we all wear silver hats on our head and go sit out there and think about UFOs. We can come to some sort of like communication thing, right? So you'll get the people in a meeting that'll go off and follow that person and they'll create their own cult.
Yep.
And so what you've got is you've got this disparate number of like organizations and databases that, how do I tell you about what's really going on out there in terms of UFO activity when I've only got 1/10 of the sightings?
Right.
And,
I totally understand. I totally get you. And like I say, I don't know if we'll ever get to a, what did you call it? Knowledge.
Well, the knowledge management thing is about passing on the knowledge.
Right. And we definitely need that.
Yeah.
But I guess, organizations such as MUFON, which, by the way, folks, Rich is the state director of MUFON in both Alabama and Mississippi. Is that what it is?
That's correct. We lost a state director over in Mississippi, and so I'm helping out for that state, even though I live in Alabama.
Ah, okay. So, these organizations like MUFON, even though you hear good and bad things about every organization, they're definitely needed to help pass on this information, if nothing else. I don't know. Rich, you've been in MUFON now for how long? Involved in MUFON?
Well, going back to when I told you I was started when I was age 13. That was in 1964. There wasn't really a chance for me to have any large organization connection until I got a little bit older, by the way. So I heard about an organization at that time called the Midwest UFO Network. And that was in the late 60s, 69 timeframe when Project Blue Book was already starting to be terminated. And I joined that organization. I was living in Ohio, at Dayton, Ohio at the time, and grew up right where Project Blue Book was in Dayton, right, Pat. And anyway, so bottom line for me was a situation where I wanted to join it, and I did, and I've pretty much been with it for the whole time that I've been involved with this whole thing. So it's been a long, many, many years, and I've just pretty much stayed with it, and I believe in it very much so, because I think that Rick, you'd appreciate this, and that is that if you don't, we all know that like we can explain a good number of the cases that are out there that are called sightings, right?
Right.
We know that there's like maybe like 70 to 80% of those things, or even more, that we can explain. And I've been out with witnesses looking at the planet Venus, 30 people, and they were convinced that it is UFO. I've been out there multiple times watching people call aircraft that. And so we know that happens. And so unless you do some sort of an investigation and really find out what the true unknown is, how can you talk about what the nature of the UFO is if you don't find out which one of these things are the true UFO? You get what I'm saying?
Yes. Understood.
And so if I've got a whole bunch of IFOs and I now tell you that UFOs appear to have some sort of blinking lights on them, and I'm really talking about aircraft, then you're not going to get an accurate picture of what the real UFO is, which it doesn't have lights. You get what I'm saying?
Right.
I'm just trying to give you an illustration of what I'm trying to talk about here, and that is that because we don't have the good quality, let's say if you word, databases that help us to understand what the investigated ones are, then you'll never come to the true understanding of what a UFO is. And it's important that they be investigated, and that's why I very much believe that in MUFON, and unfortunately the other organizations I talked about have all gone away, but MUFON is pretty much the only one left, and it's now the largest, and it's worldwide. So let's join in and try to all make good out of what we've got on our plate.
I support that wholeheartedly. Rich, I see, looking at your bio, you've been involved in some 400 UFO sightings, landings, paranormal mystery type things. Over a lifetime, I would guess.
Yeah.
Is there one case that just sticks out in your mind more than any other over your half century of experience that just really sticks with you as being?
Well, I think I mentioned the one case to me that kind of woke me up, and that was in Carrollton, Ohio, in the mid '70s. I was a state section director with MUFON at that time in Dayton, Ohio, and I was getting on average during that peak. It's called a flap year. During that flap of 1973, I was getting like hundreds of reports a week, and that was just around the Dayton area, right?
Wow.
And so, and that's what we talk about when we talk about these flaps that happened in the past that you don't see nearly at all now. But we would get like these huge volumes of sightings that were going on. And anyway, I got one farmer that had found a huge area where his wheat field was completely gone. And there were sightings around the area the night before, and the next day he comes out, and it's a wheat field. This is not a crop circle that I'm describing. This is an area where apparently, again, that something came down, hovered above it. It created a central depression area that was noted in the middle of the 70-foot in diameter circle. And that when you go into the center part where it was depressed, if you dig 2 feet into the ground, there's no roots left of any of the wheat. It's all gone. And then as you progressively move from the center to the outer perimeter of the circle, you then start to see, the further you get out to that outer edge, you find some roots underneath the ground, but you find them in the perfect circular area. In other words, like, X number of feet out, you start to find that there's roots. And then underground. And then you get a little bit further out and you start to find a little piece of stem equidistant in the circle that's showing above the ground. And then you get a little bit further from that, you see a swirl pattern in the wheat. And then you look and there's a puffed wheat around the entire perimeter of this thing. Now, when you see something like that, Rick, what I'm trying to say is, you're standing in something that you can't begin to reproduce.
And you were actually there.
Yeah, I'm standing there, and we're doing all the soil samples, the measures, and the whole 9 yards. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, you can sit there and say I'm not a believer, or I'm on the edge, or I'm whatever like that, but you can't come up with anything that can do what that object did. And we're talking about a microwave kind of radiation that baked the soil and that heated up around the perimeter of that thing and
turned it into popcorn.
You got it. We got popcorn around the edge. But
that's amazing.
Yeah. So to me, when you have that kind of a case, you quickly become a believer, and it definitely has an impact, and it had a major impact on me. And I'd say that if the thing that stands out the most, that was it.
Well, I could sure see why it would. That
yeah.
Now, during that investigation, did you guys take radioactive readings
Yep.
at all? And was it higher or?
Yep.
Really?
Yep. It had definitely a footprint indicating that it was it was more like, again, like I said, microwave radiation as opposed to anything else. And we, like I said, the soil was very much similar to what the Delphos, Kansas case, in the sense that it's hydrophobic. If you put the soil in water, it doesn't absorb water either. So it had the same kind of an effect as Delphos did.
Yeah, and that seems to be one commonality with sightings like that, isn't it? The soil just is gone. Everything is just gone out of it.
Yep. I mean, in the great work that Ted Phillips did in terms of documenting over, I guess, 4,000 physical effects or CE2 cases, close to kind of the second kind. I mean, there's quite a number of these things around the globe that help us to tell the story that you don't often hear about. In fact, it wasn't even mentioned in the congressional hearings, but that's quite incredible evidence.
Reminds me of something I wanted to ask you. What was your thoughts on this recent public hearings that was headed up, I guess, by Steve Bassett and team?
I watched the whole 30 hours.
Did you really?
Yes, I did. I watched all 40, even the evening things. I've got the archive link right now, and I've pretty much taken notes throughout the whole thing. So I've written actually a document that I call the 10 takeaways, the 10 key takeaways from the disclosure hearing thing. And I can just give you a summary of them if you want.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Okay, well, to me, it was a great event. I think that Stephen Bassett did an excellent job, and he did much better than any of the previous hearings. And he's to be definitely commended for the work that he did and the time that he put into it. I think that they did, again, an excellent job of trying to present. The challenge here, though, is you're trying to, in the course of a week, talk to 10 retired Congress people, one senator, and the rest of them were all congressmen and congresswomen, that had really limited knowledge of the subject. And to me, it was very interesting that in the course of the week, you watched their expressions go from one of like non-believer to more like a believer, or at least more open to the fact that there's really something going on. Mm-hmm. Anyway, my 10 key takeaways from this whole thing were that the hearings as they were held could never become a reality with the current sitting congressional leaders today. And meaning that basically, and it was even stated in the meetings, that you couldn't even get 5 minutes from any current active congressional leaders to host one of these things today because of the attention that they've gotten, the politicking going on the Hill. And so UFOs would never get 5 minutes on the Hill. That's very sad.
Yeah.
And we all know the impact of people like Jimmy Carter and David Kucinich and some of the others when they say that they see UFOs. They suffer the fates from the media and the other political people who beat the crap out of them because they've seen something.
Right.
Number two, my second point, was that there's no evidence of an ET or alien presence was made in the entire incredible testimonies that were given throughout the whole week by the best named researchers and the best witnesses. And what I'm saying to you is, despite the fact that you've got great testimony, you have nobody, and this is the sad part, could bring in the wreckage from Roswell and say, here it is. Or no one could bring in anything that showed conclusively that UFOs are aliens. They could talk about the fact that they were unidentified craft, but they couldn't talk about or provide a convincing thing that we have the proof and here it is. Right. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's in my hands. Here's the compelling proof that we're visiting by something off of this planet. All right. So then you had incredible testimony by retired Colonel Richard French, for example, who spoke about his job, which was to create fake stories for sightings. His job in the Air Force. And then you've got the former FAA director, John Callahan, who spoke about the fact that he was about the radar case up in Alaska from the JAL aircraft. And in that situation, ran into a situation where, as he comes back from talking about this, the CIA and everybody comes in and starts to threaten him that he can't talk about it. It's classified. You no longer can speak about it. And that's the kind of experience that I've had in talking to a lot of people who get shut up very quickly. So even somebody high, the head of the FAA can't speak about it.
Yeah, so no wonder the pilots don't talk about it, right?
You got it. You got it. Now, the third point was that UFO story by the news media is not news, and objective journalism is dead.
Yeah.
You know what I'm talking about there, right?
It's all the play the Twilight Zone music at the end of the interview, or
well, we have the talking heads, and now you start to have all the newsmen giving their biases towards the phenomena. They all inject it in their stories, like, you know, Anderson Cooper and all these other people, right?
Yeah.
So objective journalism is just forget it. You're not going to get it. Number 4, public awareness and support of the events was limited. Despite the fact that this thing was going to go on and the nature of it and everything else, like a lot of people I spoke to had no clue that it was happening. Number 5, the credibility of ufology is hampered when one presents all the related aspects associated with the phenomena. In other words, if I start telling you about animal mutilations or human abductions or something else, then people's eyes gloss over, they immediately just blow it off, and they consider it to be a hilarious kind of topic, right?
Right.
And yet, those aspects may be part of it, and it need to be looked at objectively by scientific means, if you would, by scientific study. But we immediately shut it up and call them kooks and let them go. So they've done the CIA and everybody's done a great job of basically making this into a mockery thing, promoting it on tabloids, probably controlling the media, and that's why we are where we are. Number 6, humans continue to be based on, their beliefs are based upon seeing things versus their acceptance of it. And you know, I run into that all the time. If I don't see one, I don't believe it, you know, that type thing. And so sad to say, but, you know, I could tell you about radar cases that would blow your minds, radar visual cases that would blow your minds, jet pursuit chases, me standing on in that wheat field to the nth degree, and you're going to have somebody that says, I don't believe it until I see one, right?
Right.
Another point is ufology suffers from fragmentation, and that's lacking one voice. And that goes back to what I was telling you before.
Yep.
Where we're all splintered, everybody's doing their own things, we all have our own databases, and forget trying to get to the one story that can tell the truth. And that was evident at the hearings as well. Recommendations by committee members to have this taken to the international level by going to the UN. Sounds nice. We've already tried to do that years ago with Eric Gary in the mid-'70s, and oh, by the way, that didn't go very far. And by the way, it does not fix the government truth embargo. You're not going to get UN to go fix the fact that we're classifying all this wonderful information in the military that's allowing you to know that we really have them. You get what I'm saying?
Yep.
So UN, nice, sounds all wonderful, good. Maybe we can all sing Kumbaya from
Yeah.
But it's not going to get the governments of the world to suddenly reveal all their classified documents on UFOs. Number 9 point is, while many cases that were cited about nukes and missiles that were being activated or deactivated, that basically what you have is that at that time when those things were going on, in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, and there might even be some in the 80s where that was going on, it's very clear to me that the United States did not have control of its airspace and its weapons. The fact that we could not capture, we couldn't track the objects that were going over our skies doing that is a very, very big concern. And so when the Air Force wants to cite that it's going to close Project Blue Book and that there's no threats to the national security, it's totally bogus.
You know, that's one thing that I just cannot understand, that people are not as interested in,
Yep.
you know, the total defense, nuclear defense of this nation. And it just doesn't seem to bother people.
Yep. I mean,
Unbelievable.
they had an active, they've been in Russia and did the same thing in Russia. In Bentwater's case in 1980, they were hanging above that place and had interactions with the warheads. So, I mean, wouldn't you want to be concerned about that? And oh, by the way, they're seen and photographed. That was talked about at the hearings about the objects that were traveling around Minuteman missiles and firing what appear to be lasers at them. Come on. I mean,
you would think it would make people at least want to look into it. My God, you know?
Yeah. And then the last point that I made, Rick, was this, that basically it's very clear that technologies are not being shared that could save the planet and us, and that we do have technology that can take ET back home, as Ben Rich talked about at Lockheed Martin, that we've already developed those technologies. From what I know, even in working where I work, that you have materials that look like things like shape memory alloys that look just like and sound just like the memory metal that was found at Roswell, that came out from Battelle in the early 60s, was developed by the Naval Ordnance Lab, like nitinol, which is nickel titanium, that can remember its shape and with heating can basically go back and return to it. My point is that the military would have automatically collected all the crashes that have happened. They would have already taken it back. They would have re-engineered it. We're already using those things in current systems. They're already being put into production, but nobody's telling you that that's an alien part or that's from Roswell, and we got that one from this and that. So they're already there. And we have these special access programs that are out there, that and unacknowledged SAPs that are out there that are basically being funded. And the one point that also came out was that the DoD doesn't, and I knew this from working in the IT, is that it doesn't have accountability of the money that it spends. And so consequently, there's probably billions and trillions going against these projects. And we're likely already out there and have already produced anti-gravity types of things, and that's probably what we're seeing in some of the skies.
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. That's quite a top 10 list, Rich.
That's my top 10.
Dave's top 10 list, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
Rich, as much as I hate to say it, we have come to the end of our time tonight, and I just have so much more I want to talk to you about, because I think, obviously, we've just scratched the surface of your knowledge. Could you come back again and talk to us some more here in the near future?
Happy to do that with you anytime, Rick.
Oh, that would be great. That would be great, because I'd really like to talk to you more about some of these folks that you worked with, like J. Allen Hynek and Donald Kehoe, and I got to tell you, you are about 10 years older than I am, and you don't look it. So you must keep yourself in good shape.
Well, thank you so much. Appreciate it. Yeah, I kind of keep active on everything, and I hang around with young people all the time. So
that helps.
That does.
That helps. All right. Well, Rich, thanks again for being on the show tonight, and I will definitely reach out to you for scheduling up a second visit, and we'll keep looking up and keep investigating.
Hey, good. Thank you for having me on, Rick, and it's been a pleasure.
Okay. Good night, Rich. Have a good evening.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
answer is to keep it. You'll believe it when you find something screaming across your mind. Green slime.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Topic UFO. Tonight's guest is Mr. Rich Hoffman. Mr. Hoffman has almost a half-century of UFO experience. He's been involved with MUFON in all sorts of different ways. Wouldn't mind. I want to change things up a little bit tonight, and I want to start off by asking you a hypothetical question, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
Okay, here we go. Let's say someone came up to you and said, Rich, you have 2 or 3 minutes to address the total population of the planet Earth, and you can tell them anything you wanted to about ufology, about UFOs, about ETs. But you only have 2 or 3 minutes to tell what you wanted to tell. What would you say? What would you want the people of the world to know about this subject?
Well, that certainly is a tough challenge in 2 and 3 minutes, but let me try it this way. I guess
Been involved in some 400 sightings, landings, other paranormal activity, and he's worked and met with some of the most famous names in ufology, which I'm really interested in hearing about. So we're going to be bringing him on in just a second. But before that, I wanted to make a quick announcement. As of today, I just received notification that Topic UFO program has been accepted as part of Roku's public library of channels. This is huge news because it is going to make the show easily available, easily found, by all 5 million Roku devices out there. So this is huge as far as potential viewership. So can't be more excited about that. All right, very good. So let's get on with the show. Mr. Rich Hoffman, are you out there, sir?
I'm here, Rick.
How are you tonight, Rich?
I'm doing great, and by the way, congratulations on that move. I hope that works out for you.
Oh, it is. It's going to be a potential large thing. Rich, I was thinking today, when I interview people such as yourself that have been involved in ufology for so many years, have met so many people, done so many things, it's really hard for me to know how to start or ask the first question. So I was wondering if you...
For me, it's a situation where I got involved in this at age 13. I've been with it for now 49 years. I wouldn't have spent 49 years of my life just like looking at swamp gas or anything like that if I didn't think that there was something to it. I've had the pleasure of working around and being on cases where I stood next to Project Blue Book staff who were actually doing their investigation the same time I was. I had the pleasure of talking with Air Force pilots who had just taken film footage of the UFO in the sky, and it was confiscated after they landed at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. That I've stood out in the middle of a landing area in the middle of a field that's been baked